Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this month's lecture. I'll begin with acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respect to the past elders of past, present, and those who have joined us today. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce our speaker, Professor Sonia Liu here. Professor Sonia Liu is a poultry nutritionist. She works closely with poultry industry in Australia as well as overseas. And her work basically is interested in developing cost-effective strategies for poultry farming, and which can also enhance animal welfare throughout the world, which is, I think, the most noble cause of this work. Sonia holds a Master's of Food Science and Human Nutrition degree from University of Queensland, and she did her PhD at University of Sydney. So it's like alma mater for her. She's a recipient of multiple national and international awards, including Australian Department of Agriculture, Science and Innovation Award for Young People, Australian Award Endeavour Research Fellowship, Australian Research Council ARC Discovery Early Career Research Award, and she's currently ARC Industry Fellow and also the prestigious ARC College of Experts. So I will stop speaking now and I'll introduce Professor Sonia Liu. Please come on the stage and enlighten us with your work.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for sparing your lunchtime listening to a chicken talk. So I based out of Camden. I can see one of my students, Robin, is here, and he's also from Camden. So thank you for coming. And also thank you very much for being here. So I actually don't know half the content I'm going to talk about today, because the purpose of this talk is really to connect or reconnect so that we can do something together for something we all feel excited about. It's not just about chicken, but half of my talk will be about chicken. So this is the picture I found in the internet. It's around the time for Great Famine in China. And that's around the time my mom was born. So often I ask the audience whether you know every week what's the weekly consumption of chicken meat by Australian, per capita consumption by Australian last year. I can see a few well-trained colleagues and friends would know the answer. That's why I did not really ask that question this time. So just over 1 kilogram last year. And for a very sad reason, and then that's because it's the most affordable meat protein in Australia in comparison to other meat. And because we are having and we had a living cost of living crisis. That's why the chicken meat consumption had been stable for about 49 kilograms per capita per year until next year it just passed 50 kilograms. It's like 52.4 kilograms. So approximately each of us actually consume 1 kilogram chicken meat every week. And that 1 kilogram equals the overall total per capita meat consumption for Chinese back in 1961. That's the year my mother was born. So I can remember through my childhood, there is always a conversation between dad and mom and talking about we're not really short of food, but it's always a question who get to eat the meat. So that becomes a little bit motivation for me to actually started my career in the agriculture, animal agriculture. So this also give us a question now, whether we talk about a lot of resilience, of course, is very relevant in today's context and today's world. And then the fundamental purpose of the research we are doing as an animal agriculture industries, and is really to provide the food for the population. And for quite a long time, for the animal agriculture industry in Australia, people had shifted from talking about efficiency, quality of product to social licensing. So this sort of brought people back to the attention of the actual efficiency, the cost of production, cost of living in when we're actually facing a sort of food and living cost crisis post-COVID. I actually live in a suburb which people would describe the wrong side of Hume Highway. That's just what we can afford to buy at the time as a young couple 10 years ago. And to the extent Woolies in our suburb is still supplying caged eggs because they couldn't justify taking that away from the shelf in our suburb and a lot of blue-collar workers. And I can say, and we're literally 2 or 3 blocks and 1 street away from the government housing. So I understand some of the struggles certain families are facing. And this is a stats I got from Australian Council of Social Sciences. So it's 2022 data. I think it gives us a very good picture. And when I presented this overseas, especially to developing regions, and people sort of can't really understand why people living in Australia still have a food shortage and all that. And so I have to show some figure. And people really can't understand we pay rent by week. But this kind of puts things into perspective. So based on 2022 data, so the poverty line is defined as 50% of national median income. And then you can see what the income, the sort of poverty line for a single adult and also a couple with 2 children. And then there's still like a 13.4% of Australians actually live under the poverty line. Food is actually the thing people will take a cut first because that's something you completely have control yourself. You probably have to pump your car to go to work every day, but food is the thing. We see this across different regions, not just in Australia. That's the thing people will take cut first. And then what the industry has been doing very well in Australia is ever since I was born in 1980s, and the price of chicken meat has stayed quite stable. And this one is actually showing you consumption, assumption of each individual category of animal protein. And you can see the chicken meat data there for 2023 and 2024 is about 50 kilograms per person per year. And then if we look, my career path is actually quite interesting. I was trained as a pharmaceutical engineer in China. And then it's really just because we're getting to university for whatever our school can get into. What I really like is actually the pharmaceutical part of it, not really the engineering part of it. But I really think it's because my mentors back then did not really quite know how to explain things in a practical way. But then I developed my interest really in human nutrition and the food science. And I really want to do something in that space. And tried to negotiate going to China Agriculture University with my parents, but did not get approved because learning something agriculture related is not so attractive, especially with my dad's background, who spent decades of his life actually trying to get out of the countryside and live in the city. Then here comes my journey. I went to University of Queensland, actually studied a Master of Human Nutrition and Food Sciences there. Then after that, I was offered a research assistant job, actually work closely with the swine industry, pork industry here. And from that, it opens my eyes to see there's a lot of similarity between feed science, food chemistry, and also I can see the impact of my research. So to this audience, you may wonder, why chickens need a nutritionist? Because I am always the most popular person at the Christmas dinner. So people will ask, a family friend will ask, what do you do? And then I would have a smell, I'm a nutritionist for chicken. So why? This is what I tell my 3 children, because they eat better than we do. So we actually formulate the diet based on over 20 nutrients. So if I pull out feed formulation programs, and the chicken diet actually get formulated to the requirement of more than 20 nutrients. And then as a nutritionist, our job is to find the least cost combination of ingredients to fulfill the nutrient requirement for the animal at a given stage of growth. So this is just an example of a list of nutrients we actually care in the feed formulation. But obviously, different producers, different nutritionists will have different beliefs to see this is more important than that. So we need to fulfill this at the cost of certain other nutrients. So then this comes a little bit experience and wisdom. And today, we're formulating diet not just based on least cost, but also can be other parameters. Whatever we can measure, learn from our engineer colleagues. Whatever you can measure, you can optimize. So one of my dreams is actually have the scope 3 type of LCA and carbon footprint quantified at individual diet level. We can even optimize for that if that's something we really, really care. There's other things we can optimize as well. I can give an example for. These are the ingredients. So what do chickens eat in Australia? So normally about 60% of the diet is grain, but what kind of grain to use depending on region. So in Queensland and Northern New South Wales, we use sorghum as well. Perhaps you don't really know what sorghum is. Sorghum is actually quite drought resistant. And then, so it's originated from Africa, if I remember. And then it actually gets used quite a lot in the poultry industry when there is a shortage of wheat grain. And we don't really use the food grade or flour milling grade of wheat in animal feed, primarily because of cost. And then we often use quite a lot of downgraded wheat. We also use weather damaged wheat. Sometimes germination will make that protein, and also starch more digestible in the grain. So when the food industry rejected these grain, and that's the time we have a Christmas, and we can actually use them at a quite affordable price. Full fat canola seed. So Professor Dantian, thank you for coming. So we're actually doing quite a lot of canola project together. So we're working with canola breeders based on Western Australia to understand the climate impact of canola, quality in the context of human food, but also animal feed. We are perhaps the only country I know with feeding full fat canola seed to animals. And it has economical consequence of that, because you don't need to extract the oil from the seed to start with. So in terms of raw material, it's cheaper, and then and it gets used quite a lot by the industry. So I can say, so what's the opportunity? These are the things I dreamed about doing together with this group of people. And then, so where I can see the opportunity, one is really have a feed formulation program for human food. Maybe there is already something under development, I just don't know. Because whatever we can measure, we can optimize. We can even optimize the transportation cost or distance or time. So think about these days that people leave, right? We constantly have to balance, as a mother of 3, have to balance the time spent on cooking and running through between different locations. And also I worry about the kind of a nutrient, a balanced meal they're having, because that's what I do. So all these can be optimized. We are doing this to chickens, believe or not. So for a producer, a commercial nutritionist, if they're dealing with chicken diets supplied to multiple production sites, their program is able to optimize not just the cost, but of course cost, but then they will factor in the transportation distance and then also availability. All we need, I feel this one is a low-hanging fruit. So we just need the ingredients content and then also some sort of guidance of the nutrient requirement. It doesn't need for human. It doesn't really need to go to very deep details, the 20 different micronutrients. It can be at a very high level, and then give people the sort of liberty to choose the parameter they want to optimize, whether that's time, the nutrient optimization, or is at the cost. So this can be changed. I feel like that's an app moment. So again, this is just, I say whatever we can measure, we can actually optimize. So for industry colleagues who are actually dealing with integrated structure, which I will explain a little bit later, and they're really talking about max profit instead of least cost, because they can measure input from the beginning to the end. That's from the egg, so actually breeder, hatchery, and then egg, then processing plant, and the feed mill. The only thing they haven't integrated in Australia, I don't think they will, is actually the retail and the restaurant stage. But then when we go to Southeast Asia, which they have seen what the Western developed countries, how they establish their integrated industries, they kind of extended that. So they also have their restaurant, they also have their further processing plant, and then they also have their retail stores, so that they are not constantly being caught in the sort of price negotiation situation. The ingredients we often use, and from here, I want to give you a few examples without going into too much detail of an individual project. Just want to show you a few examples of we are good people, we want to work together with people. So this is example working with our plant scientist colleagues, both in Sydney and also University of Queensland. So these are the kind of ingredients that we have worked on. So one sort of example I want to give to you is the Better Sorghum GRDC Grant Development Research Council project on better sorghum. So this is a sort of a bad example from our US poultry colleagues, a sort of warning sign, because I remember about 10 or 15 years ago, they were talking about lysine-enriched soybean. I don't know whether that's still a thing in human nutrition world, but it definitely did not fly in the animal nutrition world, because we can supplement lysine hydrochloride easily at a cheaper cost, and you can control the dosing as well instead of having something inherently in the plant. The same story with the phytase-induced corn and versus phytase, we can just add that. So this is sort of based on this, give us a different way to actually co-design plant or end product for the end user. And the sorghum in Australia is actually being used predominantly for the livestock and the poultry industries, which of course is a different story overseas. So here, we previously did quite a lot of study to work out what is wrong with sorghum to cause inconsistent or suboptimal growth performance. So we kind of, from the anti-nutritive factors sort of perspective, there are three major suspects. Is the caffeine protein body. It has quite imbalanced amino acid profile and very hard to be digested. It also has phenolic compounds, which may be a good thing at the right dose, but at the same time, it also inhibits glucose utilization, and then also have a relatively higher phytate level in comparison to other cereal grains. So if none of this makes sense to you, totally fine. The key point is we identified the suspects and we told the breeders, these are the things we don't want. What can you do about it? Obviously, we can't get everything we want because just like any science, if you delete one thing, you get one thing back. So you can't really control what good or bad, what will happen. So we are targeting the protein body. This is the project that we're developing at the moment. We passed the pre-breeding stage where we are sort of engaging seeding companies and with next round of investment, and then to actually look into how we can breed sorghums containing higher protein level, but also that protein is more accessible for animals and also human. So this is the kind of, the purpose of showing you this very busy table is to show you the kind of measurement we take in a typical poultry study. And we measure we give them diets relevant to your treatment. It can be playing different levels of the nutrients, can be different sorghum varieties, and you measure weight gain, feed intake, and then you have feed conversion ratio. And of course, we take a different kind of carcass measurement based on the experimental question. So these are the typical parameters the industry people would really be interested in knowing. That's the first thing we want to know. And then when we see certain response and we want to dig a little bit deeper to understand why that response was there, then we may take blood samples, tissue samples, gut content, microbiome analysis, all that. But these are the starting point. So in this experiment, we compared commercially available sorghum up there and also against the new hybrids, and to see the difference. So this is the kind of economical analysis we can do. This one is a very simple example to show you, because the very first thing for any technology and innovation get pushed out to the industry partners, they will ask what the cost is only. So we can do the kind of feed cost calculation as well, and to see what's the sort of differences in terms of feed cost if you use these new ingredients. Again, Dan is sitting there. So this is one example of us collaborating with the Plant Breeding Institute to look at the climate condition, how that changed the different level nutrient values of wheat. So I think us and the human food industry is also a big intake of 0 grams. And I don't know whether there's any opportunity we work together and to see the impact of these seasonal, regional nutrient variations impact on actually human health. So the key thing here is 2019 is a much hotter year in comparison to 2020. And we can say reduction of kernel size and the seed size, and consequently, we see increase the level of crude protein, decrease the level of starch in terms of percentage, and then we see increase the level of phytate as well. So you can see there. But the interesting thing there is the heat-stressed grain, despite having higher concentration of crude protein, that protein is less digestible. So there's still something we don't quite fully understand there. Again, another example, where we did kind of similar thing and to understand the heat stress on canola yield, oil, and fatty acid profile as well. Then I'm going to present something I don't quite know. Is that? Let me see. No, actually, I still know this. So I'm wondering whether poultry can be used as a model in a much more broad research. Of course, this is not, I'm not saying poultry is the answer of everything, but this is just a person really wanting to work with this group of people and outlining all these opportunities. And we just need to identify someone who is very passionate about it and come to visit us at Camden, and then maybe there will be a project underway. So I give you an example of the sort of early collaboration with Charles Perkins Center. Is really my postdoc research fellowship with David and Stephen. And then so what we have seen, we use the geometric framework in poultry to understand the macronutrient impact on feed intake and also nutrient utilization, carcass composition as well. And this is another example with Associate Professor Kathleen Gruber and her group, and to actually use some knowledge, existing knowledge in poultry to understand the nutrient requirement in endangered Australian bird. Typically, we quantify nutrient requirement in poultry because we have enough number of animals to use. We often give them titrate type of study. So we give them a series of a diet with different levels of the targeted nutrients. We measure the outcome, and then we quantify the sort of a requirement for that particular nutrient. So we can do this with no problem, quite straightforward, and do that at the Camden. So that's a single nutrient. Another thing we do is actually several nutrients all combined together, which is also what CPC groups are very good at doing. So this is just an example of using surface response methodology to understand the branch chain amino acid impact on growth performance. Then my personal interest is really the glucose and the amino acid utilization post-absorption, because my PhD is about synchronization, which happened a long time ago, is synchronization between the glucose and amino acid absorption and utilization, how that would benefit feed efficiency and net protein deposition. There are a few sort of speculative ideas, but haven't really been approved. So these are just the list of things this can be extended to. Let me see the next. Okay, so the next thing I will just go through very quickly, and is the low crude protein diet for poultry. Is kind of a sort of a hot topic in Australia and overseas, no matter where I go, and people talk about low protein diet for quite a long time. And the reason for that is because you can say this diet, and they also give you an idea what kind of ingredients is in a typical poultry diet. So you have soybean meal as your primary protein source, and then we also use synthetic or crystalline amino acid to add in the diet to bring down the total crude protein level. When we do this step, and we call this diet is low protein diet. And the more synthetic amino acids are available out of there, so we can bring the crude protein level in the diet lower and lower. The challenge is how we can do that tastefully without compromising growth performance. And the reason why the industry really care about it for two reasons. One is in Europe, because they're actually actively monitoring their nitrogen output from their production. Therefore, if you have a low nitrogen input, then you have low nitrogen output. But then if you go to places like our Southeast Asian neighbors, because they import a lot of soybean meal like ourselves. So the Australian industry is very interested in this research because we import all our soybean meal used in the livestock production. So we want to see to what extent we can reduce it without compromising growth performance and efficiency. Why is that? Because we don't have enough rain to grow soybean for animal use. And so this is just a quick example of explaining why when we add synthetic amino acid, one amino acid at one time will actually reduce the crude protein level. And if you can sort of imagine all these different shapes, except this one, they are actually intact protein. So that means it contains more than one amino acid in that protein. And when we add it, and we will increase the height of the blocks. So there are many times in this game, I think it happened to all of us, we desperately just want this and to save us so that we can bring down the height. And that's the kind of principle behind of this in terms of feed formulation. The very first question when we did this low protein diet, and it's linked with my sort of synchrony nutrient absorption, synchrony and utilization question is whether 1 gram of non-bound amino acid, whether that equals to 1 gram of protein bound amino acid. I hope I'm not going to put you to sleep. So yeah, this is probably very obvious to this. Very obvious to this group is for non-bound amino acid. It's it's assumed to be 100% digestible, and it can be absorbed immediately when it reaches small intestine. But for protein-bound amino acid, obviously it requires digestion. So we need endogenous protease to sort of hydrolyze it and into different sizes and shapes. And then it gets absorbed in terms of oligopeptide. So it's not really, so that we think in theory, they should have difference between these two groups. So we actually conducted this study, and to verify this hypothesis, we have 3 dyes containing different levels of total non-bound amino acid, and then we mixed them up 7 different ways to gain different points on the surface. And what we found is, what we measure, of course, is the key parameters of what the industry people really are interested. So feed conversion ratio and the weight gain kind of tell us the same story. Is the combination of the soybean meal-rich diet and the whey protein-rich diet gave us the best sort of performance and efficiency. So this kind of tell us there is an upper bound of non-bound amino acid we can use in the diet. So we calculate back and say what's that optimum diet and what's the optimal level or highest level of non-bound amino acid it can contain. So we give this sort of a recommendation back to the industry and say, when you do feed formulation, this is something you need to pay attention to. So I quickly skip that. Then when we do low protein diet, similar to human, some of the findings published here in Charles Perkins Center is when we eat low protein diet with increased starch concentration in the diet and decreased added fat in that formulation, and then body fat becomes a problem. So we see the same thing in chickens. And there are a few speculative ideas and the ways we're trying at the moment to try to reduce, because when we feed chicken in a shed, they're having one diet. So that's why it's important that diet containing all the nutrients they need. So it's a kind of a different scenario in comparison to us. So this is just a very superficial correlation between fat pathways and also different parameters we measure. It's quite interesting to see there's no correlation actually between the fat pathways and also starch intake, but there is a correlation with protein intake and also the starch to protein ratio. So we start paying attention to the starch to protein ratio in the diet as well. There are quite a few other examples of currently run projects, and I'm not going to go into details. So the purpose of a previous sort of slides is really just to show you what we can do from the production, from the animal production perspective, what kind of analysis we often do. These are the sort of other subjects we're doing with the industry, and the current project as well. So feed enzymes is something ongoing, and there's always new feed enzymes that get developed by the industry and trying to utilize that in the feed industry. Poultry is often easier to start with because the risk farmers and producers deal with is relatively smaller in comparison to other larger animals. So when there's an innovation, they often try to use that in poultry first. So our expertise is phytase protease. They have been doing that for ages. And then also non-starch polysaccharide degrading enzymes as well. And that's just another 4-hour talk, it can be. Then another ongoing project with ARC, which is my current industry fellowship, is early development and what actually make the first 7-day chick performance best, optimize that, whether it's nutrition or whether it's some other things, and how that can sort of have longer impact on the chicken's efficiency and health and resilience to disease and down the track. quite early stage though. And the heat stress is relative to, this is relevant to our Southeast Asian colleagues and the kind of regional impact that they are facing. We're increasingly seeing that in Australia as well. And the reason is because a production site has been forced to move out of our most adequate agricultural land. So they're being pushed inland, therefore we see more and more heat stress and the challenges there. If you're interested, I hope today's talk is really just plant a seed on your mind, these things. I haven't mentioned, but I have a lot of colleagues at Camden who are very eager to work together. So with you and colleagues you know, if they're not here, and please let them know. So come to visit us at Camden and show you our facility, then you have a better understanding of the kind of research we're doing. Yes, we have free parking and very few traffic lights as well. So this is what AI says. These are the things I don't understand, but I think there is a space we can use each other's expertise. Is using poultry as a model to actually understand the human health issue. And when I say use each other's expertise is obviously the human side will need to be driven by very passionate people from this group. But then what we can certainly provide is sort of the animal lab and all that. If there is a common thing we're trying to solve, like the early nutrition project, my current fellowship with, we can potentially invite the industry partner to join us to actually solve something practical, apply at the moment, but also down the track, we can have other impact. So this is what AI says, what chicken can be used as a model for. So I just put that there. By the way, I'm nowhere the expert. So yeah, and thank you for listening to my talk. I hope I will get some questions. And if there's only one thing you need to remember today is this. So the reason chickens grow fast is not because the industry used added hormone. It's for 3 reasons. One is genetic selection. So no one can leave this room without knowing this. So one is genetic selection. So the breeding companies actually run through very intensive genetic selection program. It's not genetically modified, it's genetic selection. It's the same as the way we select dogs with a long back and short legs. It's the same. They're just monitoring them and measure them more accurately so that we are selectively breeding the birds actually have a better metabolic efficiency and the feed conversion ratio and all that. Now they understand a little bit more of what people and the market want. They actually select for other traits as well. And the second reason is biosecurity and the veterinary care. So the mortality rate is relatively, if you do everything right, then you have less risk, and then you can actually have chickens free from subclinical challenges that they're going to grow much better. I should say they should be able to reach their genetic potential much better. And then the third one is, finally, I can claim some credit, is the good nutrition, because nutrition and feed is it's like a petrol to your car. So how far your car can run, the engine can run, that depending on the design. You already paid for that when you buy the car, but the ongoing cost of running the car is a petrol cost, your maintenance cost. So it's the same. That's why nutritionists in the industry play an important role, because that's 70% of the production cost is the feed. So please remember, as an industry, the chicken meat industry never used added hormone. So that's not the reason they grow so fast. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much, Sonia, for such a wonderful talk and enlightening us about so many things we didn't know about chicken and human as well. The floor is open for questions now. Okay, so we have.
I can take difficult questions.
Thank you for the talk. It was fantastic. I have a question from the introduction part. Something not very technical, but something that intrigued my interest.
Yes, please.
So I was very surprised to see the drastic increase in the chicken meat consumption. And is it just because also beautiful introduction on the cost of living and the economic aspect of it. So is that the only reason? Because another trend these days is the increase in the lean source of protein, and overall the world, countries such as Australia becoming very aware of the nutritional like macros, and chicken breast and chicken overall being a source of lean protein. So is that also one of the contributing factors for the drastic increase in chicken meat over things like red meat?
Yeah.
Or is it more of the socioeconomic?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So there's always complicated reasons people make purchase decision. Price is not the only reason, but as a human being, that will be the most important reason. So I'll give you another example. Years back, and Australian Eggs did a survey and to see people's acceptance of free range and the caged eggs and cage free. I know people can get quite intimidated by that kind of discussion. At the time, the cage free production system is not as efficient as today. So the price was almost twice. In comparison to caged eggs back then. So then when consumers were just asked casually whether you care, they all care. But then when it comes to what you will buy, and they admit the price is the major decision point for them, they would buy what is cheaper. So that's sort of another example. But obviously there are other reasons, and also depending who runs the family dinner table, right? So what do you care first? So another thing about poultry meat is it's probably relatively easier to cook. So talking about my own experience. But then it's really just that it's not just a price per se, it's a price in comparison to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and all that. Yep.
Is there any, okay, I'll first go there and then I'll come to you.
Thank you, that was good. I guess a lot was spoken about how the diet impacts the body composition of the chicken itself. But have you done much looking into how diet impacts the composition of the eggs that are produced? And how does that potentially impact, I guess, like the industry, so to speak, of eggs, and how's that sort of changed over time?
Yes, yeah. Thank you for your question. And I just realized one thing. So I haven't explained very well. So the chicken meat industry and the table egg industry, despite all about chickens, they're actually separate industries. The reason for that is we use different birds. As a researcher, of course, I do research in both. But then we talk to different funding bodies, we talk to different stakeholders, and a very different industry structure as well. The chicken meat industry is highly integrated. That means the same owner will have a breeder farm, hatchery, processing plant, grower farm, and also the feed mill. But then the table egg industry is still quite sort of spread. So we're talking about over 200, 300 egg producers around the country. We're only counting the registered one. There's still quite a few backyard operators. They don't bother even to put their hand up. So, but then to answer your question, I can speculate. Yes, definitely it can. There are studies overseas showing so optimize the fat in the diet will have a potential to actually optimize the fatty acid profile in the yolk. I suspect the similar things could happen with the egg white as well. However, interestingly, this is how amazing talk to the EEC colleagues, because functionally it's an egg. The egg needs to grow into a chicken. So there must be some genetic mechanism to actually stop that change too much. So which is the bit I don't fully understand, but I think, I can argue both ways, but I haven't done any research myself. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, mine is a very simple question. About the low crude protein diet, how much of the original optimized diet would have to be changed to support that sort of low crude diet?
You mean the diet composition change?
Yeah.
Yes. So what we do is we take the intact protein, which is typically the soybean meal, out. Then we add the synthetic or crystalline amino acid in. So when you do that, we're trying to, instead of saying we are fulfilling the protein requirement, we're actually now fulfilling the amino acid requirement. Then that becomes a question, how many amino acids you actually fulfill? So they only limited the research for essential amino acid requirements, and some will even go down to glycine, serine, but very few studies about phenylalanine and all that. So yeah, that's what the major change. So your nitrogen pool will change, and consequently your essential and non-essential amino acid ratios will change. And then because we're doing this, the cost formulation, the starch content in the diet will change as well. Can show you the difference.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sonia. With the super sorghum breeding experiment, I noticed that you had some differences in mortality. Were they statistically significant, and do you have any sense of what caused?
I think from memory, maybe they are not statistically significant, but I can go back and check. Often we don't, with the nutrition studies, and unless we're doing challenged type of study, we don't really see big difference in mortality. The only thing challenging in sorghum would be the anti-nutritive factor, which is a phenolic compounds, but I can't imagine that actually kill chicken. Yeah, I'll go back and have a look.
And if I could also ask one other, I was fascinated by the way you sort of wove together the integrated industry story, etc. But I know you're also doing some stuff in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
I would imagine, based on the size of the chicken thigh fillets that I see on my plate when I'm there, that it's a very different breed of bird that dominates the industry there.
Yeah.
So what are the differences in the constraints for the way the industry operates, where you've got an awful lot of backyard or on the street kept chickens?
Yes.
That must intersect with more intensive ones, and there'd be all sorts of issues for both disease and what breeds are being.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. We just we just said goodbye to one of the visitors from Vietnam, and then so learned a little bit about how local people see the white feather chicken, which is our sort of the kind of chicken we can buy from supermarket. So to them, it's actually much cheaper product. And the producers mainly produce that to supply McDonald's and KFC and all that. And then the village people, and they will grow their very slow indigenous chicken. And then so obviously, like you said, there will be biosecurity risk and all that sort of thing, but they just would not change. They want that kind of indigenous and native type of meat. And there's a trend in Europe because to the extent chicken meat, I think is a victim, the industry is a victim of their own success. So they made the chicken meat so affordable. And then to the extent I heard comments and say it's actually more expensive to buy potatoes than buy chickens. I don't know how true that is, but then so you can say that a slow growing bird market start growing quite dramatically in European market. Yeah, so instead of having 56 days of chicken, you have 3 months or even longer chicken. Yeah.
Thank you. I was wondering about the environmental impact and whether you're seeing much in the industry partners that you're working with, many, I suppose, significant efforts around reducing environmental impact. I know you mentioned nitrogen, but I just wondered what else you're seeing.
Yeah, definitely. So part of our nutritionist work is really just to optimize the nutrient utilization that will have a direct impact on many nutrients. So another example, not my own research, this research had been done by pioneers here in University of Sydney, say 20 years ago. So phytase. So phytase is really a feed enzyme now being used globally in all poultry and swine diets for monogastric animals who cannot really utilize phytate, which is the major form of plant holding phosphorus in preparation for germination. So that phosphorus they can't use, monogastric animals can't use, therefore it goes into the environment. And the start of this phytate high taste utilization innovation is really because the industry concerned to the phosphorus goes into the environment, and they're looking at the waste. Obviously, it's more complex than that. There's some policy level of influence as well, which is very important. And there's also a global phosphorus sort of scale. One day we will run out of these inorganic phosphorus additions in the diet. There are multiple reasons, but that's another example. And then nowadays, I can say the carbon, the environmental impact and all that, I feel the information there needs to be channeled correctly, because that could be potentially used as something for product differentiation point. But that just means we need a better system and to make sure that process is fair. Yeah.
Oh. Hi, thanks, Sonia, for such a fantastic talk. I just have a question about the impact of the change in the chicken diets on the human diets. Is there any studies that shows that if we change the chicken diets, it impacts the macronutrients of the human diets, and also having better quality protein sources, and especially in the high protein diets that are very famous right now for the humans? And what's this impact on the human health as whole, as one health idea?
Yeah, if we only talk about the composition of the chicken carcass, there's only certain limitation you can change it within their genetic potential. So similar to the question about the egg nutrient profile. So I say there will be, but limited impact, because I think a different combination of these macronutrients, having a balanced food for ourselves is more important than just what is in that protein source per se. But then in terms of I think it's the One Health, right? So that's not my expertise. That's why you need to come to Camden, talk to my lovely colleagues from SSVS. And then there's a lot of conversations in AMR and antimicrobial resistance, and the use of AGPs in animal production systems and in human health sectors, and how that would have the impact. I'm not an expert, but yes, that's another thing. That's why I listed that there as a potential opportunity. Yeah.
I will ask last question, and then I'm very interested in your idea of chicken as a model for development and embryological studies. And when we talk about human development, a big portion of studies and focuses on maternal diet, and that also builds upon the gentleman's question that what do we know about the chicken mom, like the mom's diet, and if that can change the yolk sac composition, which can eventually have some impact on embryo development, and if that can be tweaked as a model system to study?
Yes, yeah, definitely. And we're actually developing our sort of operation label line, the operation process line to actually do that type of research. So we're going to start our first breeder study very soon in August this year. So we're just talking about the modifying one for our animal house yesterday. So it's a very interesting question. That's why I got interested, for the very reason you just listed all these questions. The short answer is no, we don't know for sure. So we completed the study last year and in collaboration with UQ. So they provide us eggs derived from 3 different breeder diets, have different ingredient list. This time we only played with ingredients. So one is, for example, one will contain the lentils, and one contains chickpeas and all that. Then we grow these chickens on 3 subsequent corresponding diet on them. We are hoping to see what exactly you just said, the interaction between the breeder diet and the broiler diet. We actually didn't see the interaction in terms of on this diet. To say we didn't see the broilers being fed the diet where their mother also fed actually had better performance, to put it that way. But again, this is a very narrow, sort of small scope type of study for two reasons. One is because we only measure the performance outcome, because that's what our industry partner care. maybe the benefit is not at the performance, how quick they can grow or how efficient they can convert, is actually their disease resilience. We don't know that. And another reason is because we only played with about 20% of the ingredients in the diet. Is that big enough to cause any change? That's what that means, a very small scope type of study. Yeah.
Yes, and also like any leaching of antibiotics or anything that might happen in chicken, like in poultry as well.
Yeah.
That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and let's give her a big round of applause for